Hello, everybody, and welcome to VRIC Media, your most trusted voice in metals and mining. My name is Jesse Day. We're bringing the VRIC to you each and every week with our series of expert online panels. We have a fantastic one lined up for you today. We're going to be diving into the realm of geopolitics with Tom Luongo, the publisher and founder of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast and newsletter, and Martin Armstrong, founder of Armstrong Economics and creator of the Socrates AI program. Gentlemen, it is so great to have you together for this episode.
Thanks, Jesse. I really appreciate you putting this together.
Nice to see you again.
Yes, nice to see you again as well. Always enjoy my conversations with both of you. It is so epic we could bring you together. I want to start off with the meeting recently in China between President Xi, Putin, and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, all recently together for a military parade there. The most impactful development perhaps being China and Russia signing an MOU for the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, which will transport natural gas from Russia to China over a 30-year period. In addition, existing volumes of natural gas currently flowing from the Power of Siberia 1 pipeline from Russia to China also increasing, set to increase. A lot of this is energy, obviously, that could be flowing to Europe, helping to lower their skyrocketing energy costs, which is destroying industry there. Once this deal gets fully established, Russia will also have far less incentive to sell their natural gas to EU countries. I'd love to get both your thoughts on this development and what it means for the geopolitical picture. And Tom, I'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Jesse. I've been following the trials and travails of getting this Power Siberia 2 off the ground for a number of years now, and I'm like, they've had the engineering worked out, they've had the path worked out for years. All they were arguing about was price and the moment of maximal impact to actually sign the MOU. And we don't know. I don't think anything, unless we've heard otherwise, about what the pricing scheme is going to be. But the big one that I think everybody's missing about Power of Siberia 2 is that it's going straight across Mongolia and going straight into Ulaanbaatar, which is an important economic development for Mongolia to develop all of the major copper and gold and resource mines out there as well. And we know about Olgo Toyu, the big one that's the big copper and gold project out there. Of course, they're going to need more power as that plays itself out. So to me, this is one of those big statements that says we're not, that Russia and China are they're continuing to move into each other's orbit that way, along with opening up resources across Siberia and everything else. But the other thing that's interesting about all of this is that gas is not going directly south to India. And India then had to go and make a choice as to where. I think the most interesting thing about the entire weekend was the fact that Modi was there, kind of in effect being pushed into Russia and China's arms. And I think Trump did it on purpose, but but we'll get into that later if you want. So, Martin?
I think that the real issue long term is that these neocons have they only see one objective, and that's what's in front of their nose. You had Lincoln remove Russia from SWIFT. Then he actually had the audacity to threaten China. If you help Russia, we'll do the same to you. And how do you fund wars? You have to sell debt. China's been dumping like 50 billion at a clip, and you don't own debt of somebody that's threatening you with war. I mean, it's as simple as that. And so that created BRICS, etc. So the neocons have reversed whatever Nixon and Kissinger did to separate the two. They have put the two together. And so this pipeline, what it really does long term, aside, what, Tom's talking about building up, the infrastructure over there, you are cutting off permanently the gas flow to Europe. And look, you have Kayla. I mean, she just did it's an actual video. I'll put it on my site, saying that Russia didn't defeat the Nazis and Putin's wrong. Excuse me, my father was with Patton into Berlin. They were there first. They raised the flags. That's why the Berlin Wall went up. I knew people they grew up in Eastern Germany, and all the history that they were taught was propaganda. And clearly, this video, I was shocked that she's the head of, international relations for EU, and she's saying Russia was never part of. I mean, there's even pictures of Stalin, FDR, and I mean, what book did she read? I really don't know. And then you have her out there saying, "Oh, Russia's too big and should be broken up." If I'm Putin, I have to look at this and say, relations with Europe is completely kaput. That's it. Mm-hmm. So, from what I can see, cutting this deal means that Europe is finished. As I've said before, our computer's been projecting that Europe goes into a depression. I don't think it's hard to see why. The German economy has shrunk 3% because of all these sanctions against Russia, COVID, and climate change nonsense. And then you have NATO demanding 5% of GDP. So that's 8, just off the top. All right. You can look at charts on the Fed, compare quarterly GDP growth of Europe to the United States. It's a small fraction before all this stuff.
Right.
I mean, Europe I don't see it surviving. 3 years ago when I would do podcasts in Europe from Netherlands to Palermo or whatever, and I would say the EU is going to break up, they go, really? Now I get when. We had enough. It's all changed. So it's just interesting. So I I think it is, and look, our computer has projected that China will become the number one world economy after 2032. So I think this is all part of it. Our neocons have usurped American foreign policy, particularly under the Biden administration. And just look at Europe. I mean, you've got, Macron saying they got to deal with 26 countries to send in troops to Ukraine. That's real good. It's going to be a false flag, and that, Russia did this and that. They call him the petit, Napoleon in Paris. I mean, it's just, they're all insane, in my opinion.
I agree with you, Martin. It's pretty obvious. Macron's got, I mean, when did the guillotine start? I was asked on Twitter the other day, when did the guillotines come out in France? A 10% approval rating for Macron because he's at 15, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the big thing here though is I think you're completely correct, and I'm actually been. I've been in that orbit for a while. So what I've been trying to do is trying to figure out what is Trump actually trying to do? What is he trying to accomplish with the way he's playing Putin on the one hand, and then saying, weird things about, them undermining the United States when they get together and talk in Beijing on the other hand. Which I don't buy, right? I don't, I never, if you met Donald Trump, do you believe that, anything that actually comes out of his mouth as opposed to what he actually does? Because what he's done now is, when I look around the geopolitical space and I look and I see how hard domestically and within Europe itself, how hard they're pushing this kind of collapse model in Europe. Now they're talking about, the English needing the British needing an IMF bailout and France needing an IMF bailout. This is all, as far as I'm concerned, they're just setting the stage. These are all just shaping operations before they actually get there because they know what's coming. But they've done this on purpose. I think part of the biggest problem that people have geopolitically when they act is that these are not bugs. These are features of their system that they've built. They know they're collapsing, as Martin's pointed out, and why they need a war in order to cover that collapse and to kill off a whole bunch of young men so that they can't overthrow the governments in places like France and others. But it's deeper than that. They're literally saying that, and I think Trump clearly is making a play for he's got he's got to do like this 3 big hotspots he's going to deal with. Ultimately, he's going to deal with India, that has been playing both sides against the middle, the BRICS versus the United States or versus Europe. Modi, being an Indian nationalist, was playing everybody off of each other and certainly welcoming more City of London style division. And eventually Trump was like, nope, 50% tariffs because we're not allowing you to profit off of laundering Russian oil back into the EU. You're not doing that anymore. So he forces Modi to go to BRICS, to Russia and China, in effect, hat in hand. I've never considered India a global power, and anybody who does I think is just succumbed to really bad propaganda. They LARP as a geopolitical power, but they're not. At the end of the day, they are a fourth. They're when you think about the United States, Russia, and China, and then there's India. Like it's not, they're not in the same ballpark. They're not playing in the same game. So you have them. Then you have Erdogan in Turkey. He's been doing the same thing. Plays Russia off of the United States, and then he asks for, and now he's like saber rattling against Israel, and at the same time saying that he wants accession into the EU for Turkey. Like he's playing that same game. So I don't trust Modi as far as I can throw him. I don't trust Erdogan as far as I can throw him. And then you think about what's going on in London with Keir Starmer, and it's very clear that somebody that with the blowout and gilt rates versus U.S. rates, that they're getting ready to flip the government or go for a snap election or something like that in Britain. I think all this solves down to is they know that Trump has designs to overthrow the sitting government, the administrative state in London, the same way that he renationalized DC to do the same thing, the City of London, and then what? Well, obviously, the response to from these people is, well, if we can't control all of this, no one else can either, because that's their psychological framework. It always has been, which is if we can't control North Africa, we'll burn it to the ground. If we can't control the Middle East, we'll burn it to the ground. If we can't control Central Asia, we'll burn it to the ground. Well, I got news for you. It's now, if we can't control Europe the way we want, we'll burn it to the ground. And they're trying to do the same thing in Canada. They're clearly activating agents here in the United States to try to do the same thing. So that model of chaos, of planned chaos, is everywhere. And I think Trump is hip to it. I think he's completely hip to it. And I know that sounds odd, but it's the only thing that solves like all of these different bits and pieces. Like, and I look at this as like a big stack of differential equations. If you've taken that much math, and you go, oh, well, the only solve here is that Trump is trying to execute the old system of Europe, and they're fighting back. And then the way you deal with this is you force the swing states that they're trying to push. They're trying to like find their new bolt holes to run into, and you kill them off as well. And you kill off, you force them to make a choice. Erdogan in Turkey, Modi in India. So just strategically, that's the way I kind of see the game board. And it all dovetails with everything that Martin just said. And it's, these are all the things that have been rattling around in my head for the last couple of weeks as I watch all these events play out. But it's counterintuitive to the way Trump is stating it. And the whole dollar is dying crowd who can't get away from themselves. Honestly, they just want to, they just say, oh, look, India is going to Russia and China. The dollar's dying. I'm like, no, India is going there because India doesn't survive otherwise. That's the truth. So because the United States is not doing anything at this point under Trump to destroy the dollar. Anything he's doing, everything to improve the situation and make our debt more marketable, make the dollar more marketable. And, not saying that we're not in a perilous state and that it's good, it's getting better. And what matters is better. When you look at what's happening in Germany, France, Britain, all across the EU, they are clearly getting worse. And like I said earlier, I think that's a feature of their policy, not a bug, because I think they believe that they can control the chaos, control the violence that they unleash, and then come out the other side smelling like a rose. I mean, it's worked for them many times in the past, so why wouldn't they execute the exact same playbook? Because, until it doesn't work, keep running the same playbook, right? And I think you have to think about the psychology of the people that are actually running this in order to understand, I think, the lay of the land. Okay, that should be enough.
The copper market, of course, is the biggest metal market on the planet, 200 to 300 billion globally of metal traded. Following majors around and picking up projects that they jettison can lead to great success in this business. Vizsla Copper, we're the team that brought you successes including ISO Energy and Vizsla Silver. If you want to learn more, you can find us at vizslacopper.com.
Well, and Martin, give us your thoughts. And I also just wanted to ask both of you as well about the rise of authoritarianism and the decline of free speech in a lot of these countries you've mentioned, Germany being one of them, UK really. I mean, Germany and UK seem just to be now blatantly authoritarian to the point where it's just, how do you not see it? Is this a sort of a controlled demolition as Tom has laid out? What is your view on what he has said, and just your thoughts overall on this kind of rise of authoritarianism in European countries?
Well, I think the rise in authoritarianism is self-defense. That's basically what it is. I mean, as you know, when they were creating the euro, they came to me. So I had a front row seat to this whole thing. And I said, okay, fine, this is how we create a currency. And everything they were saying, we're all going to pay the same interest rate, all this was all total nonsense. All right. It required the consolidation of the debt. And as I've said before, Helmut Kohl didn't allow the German people to vote. And he admitted before he died that he acted like a dictator. And if he allowed them to vote, he would have lost 7-3. So Germany would have never gone into the euro. The whole thing would have fallen apart. So he took Germany in. People were not allowed to vote. But his criteria was no consolidation of the debt, because he thought the people would see it as bailing out Greece and Italy, etc. I can say it now. I mean, the Bundesbank was feeding us all the information back then because they were against it. So every note, every meeting, we had everything that was going down. So I saw it from every which side.
Right.
And I warned them this is going to fail. Because it's basically the same thing as the United States. All right, if you don't federalize the debt, then you have 50 states. We got a single currency, but they all have different interest rates depending upon their credit rating. I said, that's how this is going to come out. And we saw that in 2010 when Greece went for the IMF bailout. You know, traders, I mean, I've been a trader my life. What did they do? Oh, who's next? We made a lot of money on that one. Let's go after Spain. You know, then Spain, Portugal, France, Italy. You know, you start looking at the same thing. And that's the problem here. You can read Herbert Hoover's memoirs, 1931, when basically all Europe was defaulting. And the capital was moving from one country to the next. And he said it acted like a loose cannon on the deck of a ship in the middle of a hurricane, shooting off in every which direction so fast they couldn't put a committee quick enough to figure out where it was going next. That, what he describes in 1931 is what we're going to see again. And when you have France the second largest EU, all right, country, on the verge of asking for an IMF loan. I mean, the rumors are that, they got a little over 71 billion of Russian assets, and they've been going through that too.
Yeah.
Macron is, what I have heard, is that, Macron is of the belief that believing in these neocons that Russia's weak, we can take Russia easily. Yeah, Kissinger or Kinzinger, who was on the January 6th, actually come out. You can Google it. He said we could defeat Russia in 3 days. 3 days. I mean, they couldn't even do, Iraq in 3 days. I mean, and so what is it? 5 days to take out China? I mean, these people are just nuts. But they look. Julius Caesar said over 2,000 years ago, people believe what they want to believe, and he was right. That's human nature. So Macron and the rest of these guys, they want to believe that Russia is weak and they can defeat it. And then they get the 75 trillion in assets that they have in natural resources, and the way they see it is that that's twice the size of U.S. national debt. They will rise like the Roman Empire and rule the world again. I mean, they're delusional, absolutely delusional. But this is the nonsense that I hear. And the most derogatory stuff I've heard, I said, you signed the Minsk agreement, you didn't honor it. You had Merkel actually come out publicly and said we never intended to honor it. I mean, that was just, I never heard of any politician in my entire 50-year career dealing with these people ever publicly admit something like that. And I said, you realize that it's 1.8 million Ukrainians are now dead because of this? The response was, yeah, but they were all, former communists anyhow. I was on the phone with Romania. They have been ordered by the EU to accept 100,000 migrants. All right. They really think letting all these people in, they'll be able to draft them, give them a gun, a hat, and a backpack, and say, go kill some Russians. It's, I've said it before, the Emperor Valens did that in 360, all right, AD. He let the Goths in because they were pleading until the Huns coming, trained them and everything else. They said, oh, thank you. They turned around, they killed the Emperor in a battle. I mean, they don't look at history. They really don't. Look, this pipeline is more than just building up China, which our computer says, Tom's correct. That's where we're going after 2032. But it's more than that. It is saying we are done with Europe.
Yes.
And that is more profound. The whole, people go, oh, well, Putin wants to invade Europe. For what? You have nothing. Yeah. You have no energy, no gold. You go into France and they're going to say, oh, thank you, or you're going to pay our pensions now. That's it.
Well, Martin, what's interesting about it, like if Putin were to do any reason, the only good reason he would give to invade Europe would be to safeguard the churches from being burned down.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, that would be at this point, and because they're burning all the churches down all across Europe. Like it's horrible. So if it's almost like if I were Putin, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to have to go like save the faith. Like, you know what I mean? And not that I believe much of Putin's quote unquote faith. I really don't. But I believe that he needs to appear to that way for political purposes. And that's perfectly reasonable. The Russian Orthodox Church has always been a wholly owned subsidiary of the KGB. So, this is one of the angles on all of this that, you know, my partner Dexter White and I talk about all the time, because it's one of his areas of both expertise and interest. And so we watch it from all of this from that perspective. It's just funny. This is the interesting part about it. The big question isn't, as Martin's put it out, that China is going to be the destination for world capital. The question on everybody's mind is, how does the United States fare, and are they going to be allowed to divorce themselves from Europe or not? Or is Trump not going to be able to affect all, you know, and put into effect all the things that he's clearly trying to now? And that's the big wild card that everybody has, I think, from every perspective. And I think that's the big wild card that, you know, investors have to have. I mean, the truth is that, you know, the United States has got, you know, it took a long time to destroy this country, you know, and destroy the capital base and destroy the people and the culture and everything else. It's not going to be, we're not going to turn it around in 5 years. And,
no,
you know, this is a process. And the question is, you know, do you have the strength and the certitude and the wherewithal to actually see the process through, understanding that it's going to take a certain toll on your ego in the process. And if so, great. Like, you know, I get to be as rapidly pro-American as possible, knowing full well that does not necessarily mean that we're going to continue to quote unquote rule the world. Like, I get it. You know what I mean? So, and I think that's a rational position to take, which is that, no, what Trump is doing is the right thing. And the question is whether or not he's going to be allowed to do it. And from my perspective, as a commentator and as a, you know, and as an American, I'm like, look, I'm going to cheer the guy on to do the right thing, even knowing full well that his odds of success are slim. Because if we don't, then he doesn't have the political capital domestically to actually improve his odds. Like, that's reality. And, you know, watching my former brethren within the libertarian community lose their minds because they have no skin in the game, as, you know, philosophically or even emotionally, or because they're all rabidly anti-American. Like, I'm over it. I'm not going to play that game anymore. And I think that's part of the wild card that we're all, like, you know, we're trying to, you know, parse, you know, the day-to-day events, but what do they mean? But what do they mean for you as an investor, as a person, you know, as an economic actor? Like, what do you do? And, you know, clearly you hedge your bets, but you hedge your bets, you know, with the right framework of, I'm going to defend my homeland as
right.
opposed to not.
I mean, that's a psychological, you can look it up. They call it rally around the flag.
Sure.
It's a psychological tactic. And this is why Europe has been trying desperately to get Putin to attack anything in NATO.
Right.
Every red line he puts down, you give them long range missiles, that's it. They do, nothing happens. And because if they can get him to attack, then that's how you raise your troops.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And we didn't get into World War II until Pearl Harbor. Then everybody wanted to sign up. Okay. Before, I mean, I watched even a video on documentary on FDR. He went to Boston trying to justify getting into World War II. And they said, you want us to go defend the Brits after what they did to the Irish? You're out of your mind. So, I mean, America was very isolationist until Pearl Harbor. And it's standard, you know, politicians have used this all the time. And you get somebody to attack, and then you're defending your homeland, like Tom said. All right. They don't sign up to say, well, look, we don't really like this guy. Let's go over and knock off his country. They don't sign up for that.
That's why 9/11 is the modern example of this. Is how we got the global war on terror. Like,
right.
You know, and this is why it's so easy to spin the argument that, you know, that was a planned outcome. Yeah, they had it ready to go.
Well, it was. I know for an absolute fact that the World Trade Center guys from the first one drew the World Trade Center buildings on the cells that they were in, with planes going into them. They even prosecuted their lawyer, Lynn Stewart, put her in jail, claiming she passed notes. But they were down there. They took pictures, and if you really look at why they created Homeland Security, the excuse was some agencies had information but didn't all share it.
Right.
So I knew the BOP had that photos and everything else. Mm-hmm. They knew 9/11 was coming. They let it happen because they get power that way.
Yep.
They told jets to stand down, etc. Come on. This is, Project Northwoods. Kill some Americans to invade Cuba. I mean, they doing that shit all the time.
Yep.
I have a question about the potential other side, if the pendulum swing the other way of this Trump presidency, because the left and the radical left appear to be, just as active as ever in opposing everything that's going on right now. And if we see something like the midterms being swept by Democrats or in the 2028 elections, somebody like Gavin Newsom getting into power, God forbid, and then pushing the envelope to the exact opposite direction, thus erasing any progress that many might see Trump has made or is attempting to make, as Tom has laid out. Is that a real danger here? And what would the implications of that be, Tom?
What I would say is watch the Supreme Court really carefully. The way the Supreme Court's acted all summer, they're getting ready, and I think they're getting ready very quickly now to kind of finally put a final, the nail in the coffin of active lower courts. Like constitutionally, and Martin, you probably can speak to this better than I do, because I know you're a better student of the Constitution than I am. I was reading something very interesting this morning about from a lawyer saying, look, all of these lower courts that are issuing these injunctions and rebuking the Supreme Court for its current its set of rulings is insane. It's completely unconstitutional. The Constitution created the Supreme Court and empowered Congress to create the lower courts. The lower courts don't have the ability to enjoin the Supreme Court, and therefore, if they don't have the ability to enjoin the Supreme Court, they don't have the ability to enjoin the executive either, because they were created by an act of Congress. So it's everything that we're seeing is an attack on the separation of powers. But I'll be honest with you, the way you actually finally get rid of all of this nonsense where judges can act like this is you have to out them. You have to put them in a position where they do something dumb, and then you can set precedent. As Martin, you pointed out many, many times in discussing your own case and so many things about how that's the way our legal system works. You have to create harm to then get an injunction and then get a ruling and then set precedent. That's the way our system works. So I'm watching the guys that have put everything in place, Doge, all of these things that I've watched them do. If you don't think that they don't understand what I just said, and that this is the way you start to clean up that aspect of the quote unquote deep state, because it's true. That active judiciary is part of it. And this is, again, getting back to the Democrats. What I'm getting at here is that how did they steal the 2020 election? How did they do these things? When you put it all together, the combination of mail-in ballots, active judiciary, blah blah blah, all of these things. And if you look at what Trump is actually doing on that front domestically, he's knocking all those pillars out so that this can't happen again. And then he has DNI Gabbard doing exactly what Martin just suggested about. That's why they created the DNI after 9/11 to coordinate all the intelligence agencies, and as opposed to being the gatekeeper of all and the silo over the information. That's how the DNI has been used since 2001, or since it was originally created. Gabbard's going in there and breaking down all the information silos and bringing all this stuff to the surface and then knocking these people out. So it's happening, but it's a process, and it's and you may not even get a whole lot of quote unquote indictments or any of these things for obviously treasonable material, because you've still got an activist Congress blocking Trump. That's the bigger threat, I think, than anything else. All these other things are then going to make it impossible for Congress to stop this train. It's going to be interesting to see how Trump manipulates Congress this fall over the FOMC appointments he's going to make. And I think we're going to watch a whole lot of loyalty testing within Congress over Stephen Miran and then Powell's replacement and all that. So I've been watching the FOMC fight from that perspective, right? For the last couple of months to see how that's going to progress, and then we'll see. But I think there's an order of operations to all of these things, and the next thing is going to be what the Supreme Court does when they turn around and say, "Oh no, the executive has every right to put tariffs on." Like, you can't stop that, and you can't yell at the Supreme Court, Mr. District Lower Court. Like, you can't tell us that we're wrong. That doesn't work this way. I don't know what constitution you thought you read, but that's not the way our legal system works, and you know it. And by virtue of the fact that you said that, that's an impeachable defense. You need to be removed. And and once you get one or two of them that way, everybody else will shut up because they all like their comfort. So
the only court created by the Constitution is the Supreme Court, period.
Right.
All other courts, all right, are what we call statutory. Congress created them, and legally, Congress can actually shut them all down. They're all fired. Mm-hmm. It's the unconstitutionality of this is that I get an injunction against Tom because he did something to me, and then they apply that to you.
Right.
But you had no right to defend in the issue. Right. So it's a violation of due process of law. If you're going to have a law applied to you, you have a right to object. So you can't take something that's personal between Tom and me and apply it to everybody else in the country.
Right. Correct.
As an injunction. You just can't do that. Everybody else would have the right to come in, hey, under my conditions, this doesn't apply, blah, 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 whatever. It's, you just, I have been speaking to some people on the Capitol Hill. They know I'm kind of, an advocate for judicial reform. Mm-hmm. I said, I'll be glad to testify. I know the dirt one way and the other. I mean, it's, look, there's a law that if I change a transcript in court, I go to jail for up to 20 years.
Right.
Judges change them all the time. And in the movie that this Hollywood movie that they're going to be making on me, I insisted one scene's got to be in there. And that's this judge was changing the transcripts.
Right.
And I get the transcript and I would think, gee, I don't remember that. And then the lawyer said, oh no, here in New York, they're allowed to change the transcripts. They can take out whatever they think is not relevant. I said, you got to be kidding me. So I went through all the transcripts and I put in a motion to impeach, to recuse the judge.
Right.
Because he's altered the case.
Right.
Hundreds of people show up. I go to court that day. I said, what the hell's going on? They said, it's you. I said, what do you mean it's me? You can't accuse a federal judge of committing a felony. I said, you all say they do it. Yeah, but you can't accuse them of that. That's New York. The judge gets scared. I posted it on my blog. He actually says, perhaps I put in a comma, perhaps I put in a dash. I don't recall changing anything material. The whole place went dead silent. I walked out. They said, holy shit, you got the judge to admit he committed a felony. I appealed because he refused to recuse. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals claimed they lost my appeal 3 times. And then I was out of time. So they didn't have to rule. This is the judicial system. This is what, I mean, it's hopeless. Absolutely hopeless. You can corner them and they still refuse to do anything. This is just the way it is. I wish Trump all the luck. I have been talking to people. I said, I will be glad to testify.
Sure.
I got everything documented. You really want to change the judiciary? I'm there.
Right.
I haven't gotten a call yet.
Right.
And for those unfamiliar with Martin's legal woes and him essentially being unlawfully imprisoned for years, there's a documentary out there called The Forecaster, which is fantastic. I recommend people check it out. And this is news I hadn't heard. They're making a movie about it now?
Yeah, well, there's a sequel to The Forecaster coming out, but now they're making it, turning it into a Hollywood movie. Um, I'm supposed to get the script in a couple weeks. It's they're partners with Netflix or whatever. It's gonna be like like The Big Short.
Right.
So I
Awesome.
agreed to do with it. It provided it shows how corrupt this system really is.
Sure.
It's just gotten to the point of insanity. The AUSA of New York on my case was James Comey.
Wow.
He knew that my case was all about bribing Yeltsin and blackmailing him, and that's how Putin came to power. I was in the middle of all of that. So he intimately knew about my case. When he interviews Hillary, he doesn't take any notes. There's not a 302. Never in the history of an FBI do you interview somebody without a 302. He's protected her. It's the guy belongs in. I think he belongs in prison, but it's for life, not killed. That's too easy.
Okay, well let's end on this because we've talked about a lot of things to be concerned about. We've talked about the coming potential collapse of the EU, the political problems in the US, and a whole lot more. But when looking at the world today in the realm of politics, geopolitics, financial markets, and the economy, you can take this wherever you'd like. Let's dive into both sides. What has you most concerned, and what, if anything, makes you hopeful for the future of humanity at this point in time? Tom, we'll start with you.
It's easy. The EU is going to collapse, and the EU is going to collapse. It's true. What has me hopeful is that we're going to get rid of, that it's not even okay. What scares me is their reaction, right? Because what I'm getting at is they only, the more you push them and you back them into a corner, and the more you expose who they are, the more radical and the more dangerous they become. Like nothing is more dangerous than a cornered animal, right? And that model is pretty clear. And watching all of these, watching what's happening, I don't care where you watch. I don't care if you watch what's happening in the Balkans, or you watch London, or the Midlands, or you watch LA, or wherever you watch. You see the same thing over and over again. And on the other side of it, that's also part of the hope, because people are seeing this now in real time. And then what we have, what Trump has put together is not an administration that's about him. It looks like it's about him. He likes to take all the praise, and he likes to put all the attention on him. But if you look very carefully, what he's done is he's now created a cabinet around him, a group of political superstars of my generation and slightly younger, but mostly Gen X, the youngest being, I think, Tulsi Gabbard, who still would be technically Gen X. I'm claiming her for Gen X because she's awesome. Because she's like right on the edge between being that and a millennial, right? I think she's born 82. So my point being is that you look at those people, right? That's your hope that we've got a generational shift coming within the American political system that can then be, and if America leads on one front through the darkness, then it will inspire, as always, everyone else to follow, even if it's going to be a very ugly and bloody and tumultuous, if not, depressing time to live through. Cycle that this next cycle is nasty, because at the end of the day, what Martin was talking about, and this goes back to all the years that I used to read Martin when he was, sadly in prison. Jim Sinclair was smuggling your missives out. And I started to see the world this way, that we're looking at the end of a 300 plus year cycle of history that's coming together all at the same time here. Solar cycles, everything is coming together all at the same time. And the West as a thing is not going to get out of this without getting our hair mussed. We're just not. And so that's both a blessing and a curse. And we have to be prepared as people to be strong enough to impart that idea, and bring it back and cultivate it within the societies in order to come out the other side, and come out in the same way that the Russians people came out of the end of the Soviet Union and that terrible 10 years of that they had. I remember when that happened, and I was in high school at the time. I said, these people are in trouble. This is going to take decades for them to recover from, and that was the case. And then it took 10 years to finally bring somebody to power who would be willing to fight for the Russian people, and then another 10 to 15 years for that man to then put something together in Russia that is a foundation on which something can be built. And notice that he's got Russia to the point where it can become a real force of nature. And what are the jackals of Europe trying to do? Saddle him with war. He wants to transition now to the next phase of his economic plan that he's wrote about ages ago. And they're preventing him from doing that by saddling him with a war on his southern border, with a war on his western border and a bunch of border skirmishes on the southern border. So, and guess what? They're doing the same thing here in the United States. They're doing Canada. They're turning Canada into a hostile nation to our north, which really, honest to God, Canada always has been. I just published a great interview or great podcast with Matt Arrett and my partner Dexter White about this very issue. Clearly, Mexico was turned into a narco state for the exact same reason. So you can see the patterns, playing themselves out. But if you're aware of the patterns, you're aware of the behavior, then you can alter the next. You can set the terms for what the next cycle of history is going to look like, and that's our job. That's where I see the job of my generation and the ones coming behind us to do. And if we do this right in this moment in time, we set the foundation for a much better set of period of history that will extend far beyond, certainly my days. That's what I'm hoping for. And that's what I'm hopeful for. And that's what I try to, let people understand. That's where my motivation for my commentary comes from. It's not from any other, it's not Pollyanna-ish. I know it's going to be tough. So that's where I am.
And Martin, what has you concerned and what has you hopeful for the future?
Well, the hope is basically what Tom is saying, is that we are coming to one of these 300-year cycles that is a major political change. And that change comes only when people begin to see it. So they're starting to see all of this stuff, no matter where you go. I mean, like, there are your riots in Serbia. I mean, it's everywhere. People are beginning to look at government with different colored glasses, and they're beginning to see what this is really about. I mean, just to give you an example, the head of the studio, who's doing this Hollywood film, he flew out here last year. He's coming out again at the end of September. When we started, he was skeptical. Oh, so what is this? This deep state, 6 guys in a room smoking, cigars. I said, no. They believe those conspiracy theories. And I've watched them over the last year changing. We had a lunch actually in Berlin after our conference last year in May. And I said, look, computer says Trump's going to win big time. And he said, oh, come on. Every newspaper in Europe said Trump was going to lose. I said, sorry, he's going to win. I said, but I know these neocons, and I'm telling you, I can't imagine they're going to try something. I think they're going to try and assassinate him. Then he was thinking I'm really a conspiracy theorist. And after that happened, he called me on the phone. He goes, "Holy shit, you really know these people, don't you?" I said, "I've been to dinner with them. All right. I've discussed these issues with them. When you look in their eyes, you do not see a warm light. And it's just the way it is. So I've seen him come around. And, a big Hollywood exec, usually to the left, he's moved to the right. Which okay, I feel like maybe you're the right person to do this then. So this is how things change. They do take time. All right. It is a slower process, but with everything they do, all right, the truth keeps coming out. All right. Look, I was warned back in the 80s and the 90s, be careful, they will try to use women to get into you. That's the Epstein model. But they get all these people, they're pedophiles or protect. They're not pedophiles. Basically, they were there to be blackmailed. And that's what this was all about. And he could have moved his island just 50 miles the other side, the British Virgin Islands, legal age is 16, not 18. So it was all set up to do precisely what they do. They were always trying to get me to join their club to manipulate the markets and stuff, and I refused. And I won't say who, but Epstein's girlfriend, Maxwell, her father, Robert Maxwell, was trading with all the hedge funds. He lost 200 million pounds on Russia and fell off his yacht and drowned a week or 2 weeks before he was subpoenaed to be testifying. So when somebody kept asking me to join, I just said to him, I said, I do know how to swim. And he just looked at me and smiled. He goes, "Well, things happen." I said, "Yes, I know things happen, But this is it. They've always band together to manipulate markets. They're not traders. It's all about, rigging the game. And I've been in this so long. I knew when I was a gold dealer initially, I was melting. I was buying all the scrap gold from everybody in the country and would bring it in. And most people don't realize that New Jersey's the gold capital of the United States. You got the three major refiners there. And so, I'd have an armored car, would just take it over to Englehart, which was less than an hour away. Englehart was part of Fibro. They made so much money manipulating gold going into 1980. Fibro then takes over Salomon Brothers, the biggest bond house in New York. Then what happens? They get caught rigging the U.S. Treasury auctions the same way they were doing commodities. That's when Warren Buffett steps in. "Oh, don't shut them down. I'll assume the chairmanship." And he was involved in silver junk. Look, it just goes from one side to the next. They're all in there. That's the way it was. They were never traders. It's paying bribes. I had Ford Motor Company as a client, and they wanted to go sue Goldman Sachs because there were bribes that were paid to Russians to call back the platinum in '98 and sent platinum up $200. Got all the auto companies to have to pay high levels for platinum, and then crashed it. This is the stuff that goes on, and so people are beginning to see a lot of this. This is part of this cycle. Why things will change. The light at the end of the tunnel comes after 2032. Before then, yes, it's going to be difficult. I don't see Europe as surviving. They have the fact you have the UK and France on the verge of having to get IMF loans. The system is the way it was designed. Merkel, when she refused to bail out Greece, they don't understand their own systems. Yeah. All right, every bank, because you didn't have a consolidated federal debt, they had debt of every member state. So then people were looking at the banks. Which bank has the most of Greece debt? Short that one. It turned into a complete contagion because there is no central unit to bail out a member state. So they got to go to the IMF. Every bank has to have, a cornucopia of bonds of whatever state there is. So you get a problem like that. France goes, applies for an IMF. I'm telling you, you're getting a contagion. So this is part of the other side that forces the war side. Mm-hmm. They need the war to cover up everything else. If they don't do that and they start defaulting, the pension funds are all screwed. I warned the ECB about that when they went negative in 2014. Mm-hmm. All right, you're strip mining the banks and the pension funds. Pension funds, 70% generally have to have government bonds. And you go negative?
Right.
Not only are they not making money for future pensions, you're strip mining them. Mm-hmm. And it gets very frustrating from my standpoint because I just see the same stupid mistakes over and over and over again. And it's like, why do you even call me? I don't know. I tell you what to do, you don't do it. It blows up, and then you ask me if I can fix it in 2 days. It really is pathetic.
Well, then we have after 2032 to look forward to for all this nonsense to hopefully be put to the side. For now, but before we finish up here, Tom, tell us about the Gold Goats and Guns podcast and newsletter.
Sure. The podcast comes out at an irregular rate based on whatever comes into my head that I think is worth talking about 4 or 5 of them a month. The newsletter comes out on a monthly basis. It's a kind of standard retail level investor design podcast portfolio strategy, along with unique and forward thinking commentary from myself and Dexter White on a monthly basis, and that's what we do. And it's really quite simple that way. And then of course I do a twice weekly private podcast for my subscribers as well, where I go over the markets, keep them abreast of what I think is happening and how that ties to the geopolitical day-to-day and domestic day-to-day. So I do.
Great. I'll put a link in the description below. Martin, tell us about Armstrong Economics and the Socrates program as well.
Well, the Socrates program that I wrote was largely from a hedge fund manager's perspective. I realized that everything is connected. You can't just forecast gold and nothing else. Because the wild cards always come from the outside. Mm-hmm. The World War I, World War II is what sent all the money rushing to the United States. And without that, we'd still probably be mostly farmers. I mean, it's that's what created the Industrial Revolution, making arms and tanks and everything else. I mean, so all this was it was clear that this was an international, and we're all interconnected. And unless you can look at that, you don't stand a prayer in hell of surviving the long term. But and then Armstrong Economics, we keep it as an open forum. You don't have to put in emails or anything. We don't even sell advertising, so it's just mainly for free speech to allow. We're not blocked even in China or Russia. It's quite interesting because everybody knows they're not going to get by the way, in a footnote, overthrow your government stuff, so that's pretty much what it is. We try to do that. The Socrates program, we have different levels for retail all the way up to institutional. So most institutions, the big ones, they all tend to look at that because it's all done by a computer, so there's no human interaction with it, and so it's not biased. And if it's the same system on everything, once you understand how to use the system, it's very easy to just pick up India and look at this, or whatever country you want to look at.
Great. Well, I'll put links in the description below to Socrates as well as Armstrong Economics. Gentlemen, this is delivered as expected, an epic conversation. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Jesse. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.